All righty. Happy Monday, everybody. Morning. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in here. I'm sure some other people will be joining us here soon. So today, what I really wanted to talk about is something that I call ready, fire, aim. And this might be something that you've heard before, but the overarching concept of this whole thing is that real estate is, if you think about it, kind of like football, it's a game of inches, right? So in other words, success in real estate is not created by these big, giant turns of event, these big swings. Almost always, a successful real estate career is created 1 inch at a time. It's about taking small, incremental movements towards a bigger goal. And so when we kind of dive into this type of thing, we're really talking about consistency, doing the right things, staying motivated, continuing to move forward in the face of fear, continuing to move forward when we're tired or when we feel like it's not working. You know, we know this is the way to do it, but it just doesn't seem like it's working or doing what it's supposed to do. How do we continue to move forward through that incrementally, small actions to ultimately create a really big outcome somewhere down the line? And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm just going to kind of look through my notes as I do this. So this is actually a class that I'm going to be teaching here in Denver coming up in a few weeks. And, ultimately this is a concept that I'm really passionate about. And it's something that I could teach an entire workshop on, of like probably a full day or a full 2-day workshop on something like this. So I'm going to get through as much of it as I can and kind of hit the tip of the iceberg in the 30 minutes that I have with you guys here today. So we're going to break this down into the 3 pieces: ready, fire, and aim. And so we're going to go ahead and start with part 1, which is getting ready. And so getting ready is really laying the foundation. And I think oftentimes getting ready for our action, getting ready to take whatever steps it is that we need to take, gets confused with the aiming part, the analyzing part. Maybe you've heard the term analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis, where we think about all the outcomes, we think about all the things that could potentially happen. Well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And what about that? And next thing you know, it's 2 years down the line and we've made no movement towards our goal. So getting ready is not aiming. It's not analyzing. It's not the what ifs. It's not trying to, avoid any kind of heartbreak or difficulty. That's not getting ready. Getting ready is laying the foundation for where we're going. And so this is I teach a lot of classes on just this one topic. And so this is something that we could go really deep in. But ultimately, what getting ready comes down to, in my opinion, the way we lay the foundation for what it is that we want to create, is we have to understand why. We have to have a motive. If you were on a jury for a murder trial and they bring the person out and they're like, this person didn't know the person that got killed. They didn't, have any connection to him. They weren't angry at him. They weren't anything, right? You would be like, wait a second. Hold on. What was this person's motive? And why would this person have done this crime? That's the first thing that we would want to know. Because we all intuitively understand that we don't do anything without an understanding of why we're doing it. Even if it's subconscious, we do things because we have a understanding within ourselves of why it makes more sense for us to move in a certain direction versus another direction, unless our hand is being forced, right? So understanding our why is the foundation for everything that we do. Look at something as simple as like going to the bathroom. If the bathroom was 100 feet from you and you had to go now, are you going to walk or are you going to run? I think we all know the answer to that question. You're going to get there as fast as you possibly can. Why? Because you're motivated to avoid what would happen if you didn't get there in time. So once again, we don't do anything without a motive, without understanding our why. So if we're trying to, let's just keep using the idea of building a real estate career. If that is your objective, if that's where you're headed, then the first thing you got to do is you got to lay your foundation for why is that important to you? And I think a lot of times people get stuck on what I call is like topical desires, right? So, for example, I want to make $1 million in real estate. Okay. Well, my first question would be, why do you want to make $1 million in real estate? Well, because then I have the freedom to do whatever it is that I want to do. Okay, well, then why is the freedom important to you? Well, freedom's important to me because then I can spend more time with my family. Why is spending more time with your family important to you? Well, because, whatever. And we go down this hole. I call it the why hole, where we just ask the question, why, until it becomes obnoxious. And if you do it enough times, if you do this, 10, 12 times on the same string, eventually you're going to get down to the bottom of the why hole. And typically what you're going to end up finding is it's some kind of emotion, right? We want $1 million because it's going to make us feel happy, joyful, fulfilled, whatever it is. And so if we use the platform of, I want to build a successful real estate career, we have an opportunity to go down the why hole. Why do you want a successful real estate career? What does that provide for you? What is the feeling that you are chasing? Because at the end of the day, none of us want $1 million. What we want is what $1 million makes us feel like. And so the sooner we understand that, the sooner we can start getting down to what it is that we really truly want. And once we understand what it is that we really truly want, we understand why it's important to us. We have a motive. That's why this is the foundation for everything that we do, because we're not going to take action. We are not going to create a successful business. We are not going to be a good parent. We are not going to lose weight. We are not going to do any of this stuff that's important to us until we have a motive. And you find the motive by understanding your deeper why. So in my opinion, the best way to do that is to go down the why hole. Now, sometimes our motivations can be super small. So sometimes our motivations can be things like going to the bathroom, eating lunch, right? We're motivated to do those things, kind of subconsciously almost, right? But then there's other times where we have these big motivations, like creating a big business, losing a bunch of weight, getting in shape, being a better parent, being more present, whatever it is. These are the ones where it's really important that we take some time to think about, why are we doing the things that we're doing? Why are we chasing the things that we're chasing? Is it really that valuable to me, or is there something else? And that's a really hard question to answer, because our society tells us you want a big business. And so there's this assumption that that's what we want. Well, is that really what you want? I can tell you from experience that it is pretty cool being able to create a really successful business, being able to mentor other people. It's really cool. And so I love it. And that's why I do it, or on the topical level. But I think it's important to look at yourself, look at your actions, look at why you're doing the things that you're doing, and gain a true understanding as to what your motive is for going after this. Because if you don't have a motive, we all know what's going to happen. Nothing. More of the same. Spinning our wheels, hamster wheel, all of these things that we talk about where it's like, I feel like I'm doing these things, but I'm not making any traction. That's what happens when we don't have a motive. That's what happens when we don't understand why we're supposed to be making the move. So, here's something that, I would challenge you to, whether you're here on this call now or you're watching the recording. I would recommend getting out a piece of paper to do this and, write some of this stuff down. Or you can just kind of think of it in your head, but just think of something that you want in your life. Whatever it is, one thing, write that thing down and go down the why hole on that one thing. And then if you want to take it a step further, I would write down what it is that you want in 8 different categories in your life. Relationships, that would be family, friends, clients. What do you want your relationships to look like? Money, what do you want your money situation to look like? What do you want your career to look like? How do you want to give back to the world? It's a really important part. It drives a lot of people is our ability to give back, our ability to serve. So how do you want to serve the world or your community? Your health. What's something that you want with your health? Your spirituality, your mind, and then fun and entertainment. So you've got those 8 categories: money, career, relationships, money, career, service, health, spirituality, mind, and fun. Fun, that's one that most people forget about. What do you want? How do you want to entertain yourself? I'm getting back into woodworking and playing the guitar again because I'm making a commitment. I'm motivated to do things that are fun in my life. So go through those things and then write what it is that you want and then go down the why hole for each of those things. And ultimately, I think what you're going to find is at the bottom of the why hole, everything is going to kind of converge and you're going to see something very common. I want to be fulfilled. I want to be happy. I want to be joyful. I want to be, whatever it is, what is that feeling that you're chasing? And then you can look at each of these things that you want, and it gives us some perspective around going after these things that we say we want, because we're not actually going after that thing. We're going after the feeling that that thing is supposed to create for us. And then a whole new world opens up for us and we go, oh, I can actually find that feeling in lots of different places. Hopefully takes a little bit of stress off and motivates us to go get those things. Because there's nothing wrong with going and getting them, especially if we understand why we're doing it on an intentional level. All right, so that's the foundation, right? That's the first part, getting ready. So once again, getting ready is not about planning and, the how. Getting ready is not about the how. Getting ready is about laying the foundation, getting your motivation in place, getting to the point where you're like, all right, I'm ready, let's go. That's getting ready. The second part is fire. So obviously there's the old saying, ready, aim, fire. So why do we put fire first? Well, because like I said at the beginning of this, building a business is about action. Without action, without the actual steps forward, you're not running a business. And so a lot of times, myself included, we get stuck in these loops where we try to overanalyze everything, and then we get stuck not moving, and it's a complete waste of time. And keep in mind, I'm not saying be reckless. This thing comes up and it's like, yeah, let's go, without thinking about it. You're still going to think about it, right? You're going to correlate the action to your motivation to make sure that they actually line up. And if they do, take action. Because without action, without a step forward, you have no results. I often use the example of my daughter who is getting much better, but she's a picky eater. And, I'll say, hey, have you ever tried this before? No. Here, try it. No, it's disgusting. Well, you haven't tried it before. How do you know it's disgusting until you try it? And then she tries it, and sometimes she's like, oh, wow, that was good. And sometimes she's like, yeah, I was right. It was disgusting. Okay, great. Well, there's only one way to find out. You got to put it in your mouth and give it a shot. Same thing is true in our business. Should I call more people? I don't know. But if you call more people, you'll have an answer. Did it work? Did it not work? Should I do more social media posts? No. But if you do it more, then you'll have an answer. And so the reason that this goes ready, fire, aim is we've got to lay our foundation, then we've got to take action. And so when we look at something like this, what we're really doing here, think of somebody who is supremely confident. Anybody that you know, you may not know them personally, but just think of somebody who's very confident. Is that a person who takes consistent action, or is that a person who talks about action? Everybody I know that's really confident, they're action takers. Good, bad, or ugly, they're action takers. They've screwed it up royally and they've hit it big. They're action takers. And so the reason that they're confident is because they've screwed it up and done it right so many times that they're not worried about the outcome. They know they are resilient. They know that they are resourceful. They know that they will make it through it because they have run through the fire so many times that they've got it down. Yep, I know. If it doesn't work, I'll be okay. If it does work, it'll be awesome and I'll be okay. So it doesn't matter. So I'm going to act. So in this whole process, action begets action. The more we do stuff, the more confidence we build. The more confidence we build, the more action we're willing to take. The more action that we take, the more wisdom we gain. The more wisdom we gain, the better we get at everything it is that we do. And so what we're talking about here really is little micro experiments in our life. So think of the scientific method. If I was a scientist and I'm trying to experiment with something and I say, okay, I've got this hypothesis. I think if I mix these two things together, like this is what's going to happen. And then I start thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, but what if I mixed this with that instead? And do I do 10 milliliters or 20 milliliters? And then do I put them into a beaker or do I put them into a flask? Do I put it into, pour it onto the counter or do I, whatever? And we sit there and we just think about, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about that? And what about that? And there's all these other options and all these things that could possibly go wrong. And what if it blows up in my face? And what? Have we learned anything from that experiment? Not until we take the two things and we mix them together, we take action, as small as that little action might be, we take action and then we get a result. and that's what we want, is a result. And so when you look at people that are confident, you look at that person that's 85 years old, sitting in their rocking chair, that, has supreme confidence and doesn't care about what anybody else thinks. I guarantee you that person has made more mistakes than anybody else. That's why they're so confident, because they had the courage in the face of fear to make the mistake, to screw it up, to do it wrong. And sometimes it worked out right. And at the end of the day, they know what they're capable of. And that only comes from firing, from taking action, from movement. And so sometimes the movement is big, or it feels big. Sometimes it's small. Should I call more people in my sphere? I don't know. Call one who's comfortable. Then call two. Then call three. Then call four. It's not about calling 100. It's about calling one at a time. So it's about chunking down the elephant into bite-sized pieces. So the more that we can take the big picture and chunk it down into little bite-sized pieces, the easier it's going to be to take action. And there is a certain sense of putting blinders on in this piece, right? So maybe as a scientist, I'm looking at mixing these things together and I have all these questions in my head. Well, what if I do this and that, and I've got 30 different experiments that I want to try. At some point, I've got to go, okay, I'm putting 29 of them to the side and I'm not going to think about them. I'm going to do this one experiment and see what happens. And then I'll do the next one. And then I'll do the next one. And so there's nothing wrong with having all these ideas or having a big structure or having a big sequential series of events that need to happen to make your big idea happen. But at some point, you've got to take the elephant, you got to break it down in one little bite and just focus on that one little bite and put on your blinders, forget about everything else, and just do that one thing. Get your result, build your wisdom, build your experience, and then build off of that. Got it. Now I do this. This works, this doesn't. Great. Then you can take another piece of action, build your wisdom, build your experience, build off of that. And then eventually, I think there's another saying out there, I don't know, whatever. But eventually what happens is these little tiny actions expand until you get massive results. So that's why I'm so passionate about this, especially these first two pieces, because laying that foundation is what's going to motivate you and say, I'm ready, I got to take some action. And then the action piece is second. Do something. Because you're going to build your confidence no matter what happens. You're resilient, you're resourceful, you will be fine, you will make it through it. Have faith in yourself, have belief in yourself that it's okay to screw it up. Then you're going to be like, got it, I am resilient, I am resourceful. You're going to build that confidence. And then as you build that confidence, you're going to be willing to take more action. And ultimately, that leads to consistency. So has anybody heard in your business, one of the most important things to building a real estate business is consistency? Guess where that comes from? It comes from confidence. It comes from execution. It comes from taking action. It comes from understanding that you are fully capable to do this thing and not being afraid of what's going to happen. And so that brings us to this next piece of fear. Fear is a good thing. Fear tells us, don't go into that dark building. It looks like it might not be a good idea. Okay. So fear serves a purpose, obviously. But in our society and the way things work between the news outlets and social media and conversations with our friends and whatever it is, fear is running rampant, and it is stopping us from creating the life that we want to create. It's intended to keep us safe. And in a way, it kind of is, if we lean into it. But safe oftentimes means predictable, small, easy. And if your goal is to be predictable, small, easy, don't have to worry about anything, then you're great. But if your goal is to build a business, if your goal is to build something big, if your goal is to have an impact on the world, that's not going to work. At some point, you're going to have to look that fear in the eye and be like, yeah, I get it. This is scary, but I'm going to take this one little step through fear. See what happens. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't die. All right, cool. Let's take a second step. Let's take a third step. Let's take a fourth step. And now all of a sudden you're like, fear who? At some point you cross a boundary where you're like, okay, I recognize this is a healthy fear, and I recognize this is an unhealthy fear, and I'm going to push through this unhealthy fear because it can't stop me anymore. Because I'm so confident, because I've already pushed through it so many times, it doesn't scare me anymore. That comes from courage. That comes from recognizing what you're walking into. And even though it gives you pause, you know it's the right move and you push through it. You do that enough times and you're going to be unstoppable. Fear cannot hold you back anymore. So once again, it all comes down to taking the small steps. One other thing in this topic that I want to touch on, and once again, like I said, I could do a whole workshop on this, so we're covering a lot of ground. But one other thing that holds us back from taking action is our stories. So we tell ourselves stories all the time. I won't even go down like examples, but we tell ourselves stories all the time. And some of them are powerful, some of them are not powerful. And so one of the biggest keys to taking consistent action and pushing through the fear is recognizing when we're telling ourselves a story. It's the awareness that there's a story there that gives us the power to change the story. Because if we're telling ourselves a story of, oh, here it is again, or, oh, man, it's screwed up again, or I'm never going to be successful, or, oh, man, how come everybody else can do this and I can't, right? Those are all stories. So if you can catch yourself in that story, you can start to reframe your stories. And reframing them will give you a little bit more power. And if you do that a little bit, and you do it a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more over an extended period of time, all of a sudden, you've got powerful stories going on in your head. I can speak from experience on this. My stories used to be horrible. I was so bad to myself. And I am now in a position where I can catch myself in a negative story. And I do what I can to change it. And I am way better at it. The stories that I tell myself now are completely different because I did the work, because I catch myself in the stories and I reframe those stories and I change them so that they are powerful, so that they move me forward instead of keeping me small. So real quick, once again, you can always go back and watch the recording, or if you're watching this on the recording, I'll just kind of go through a quick breakdown of ways to reframe your stories. Number one, catch yourself in the story. You got to recognize that there's a story happening there. Number two, repeat that negative story to yourself until you consciously understand what you're telling yourself. Then speak that negative story out loud so that you can hear it. Listen to what you're saying to yourself. Then restate the story in your mind in the opposite form. So the exact same story, just opposite. Repeat that in your mind a few times and then say that out loud so you can hear yourself say it. Then keep repeating this new story to yourself in your head or out loud or whatever until you can feel it in your body. Travis Kelce. I was watching one of those Netflix shows and Travis Kelce was on there. He talks to himself constantly. I had no idea, but it was so cool. They were showing him on the sidelines and he's like, you are powerful, you are strong, you are healthy, you will not get hurt, or, like the opposite of you will not get hurt. You're healthy, you're strong, all of these things. He's constantly talking to himself because he understands that those stories are not just stories. It's not just BS. Those stories, he can feel them in his body and he's like, yes. And it pumps him up, it energizes him, it gets his body ready to go. This is not woo-woo. This is psychology. This is, how our mind and body work together. This is very, very, very powerful if we can figure out how to change the story. So repeat that story until you can feel it. And then just continue. Every time you catch yourself, continue changing the story over and over and over. Once again, micro adjustments then lead to macro changes in your life. So we just got a few minutes left here. So I'll move on to the third part, which is aiming. So this part is the smallest part, the easiest part, in my opinion. But this only happens when the first two things happen. We have to be motivated to move and then move, just like in the scientific experiment. We're running a scientific experiment in our life. So until we get some kind of result, until we get some kind of movement, there's nothing to analyze. Ed Milet was saying on his podcast the other day, he's like, it's so weird when we ruminate over these things that have never actually happened and we think about it, this horrible thing that might happen in the future. One of two things is going to happen. It's either going to happen or not happen. So if it doesn't happen, we just wasted all this time and energy ruminating over it. And if it does happen, we wasted all this time ruminating over it and we still have to deal with it. It's not like it stopped it from happening or made our lives easier once it actually did happen. So the fact of the matter is ruminating and worrying and doing all of these kinds of things are not a productive use of our time and energy. And so oftentimes what happens on the front end of us making some business decisions or should I do this or should I do that is we spend all this time ruminating about all the possibilities and all the ideas and all the things that could happen and we don't take any action. It doesn't create anything positive for us. However, on the flip side, if we take action, call one person, or whatever it is, then we get a result. That was painful. That was great. I showed up this way. I want to show up this way, whatever it is. Now we get to analyze the actual action and we have real-time data that's actually going to move us forward. So we're not ruminating. We're not wondering. We're actually taking data, analyzing it, making a choice, and then moving forward. Two totally different things. And so the reason that I don't spend as much time on this one is because it's pretty straightforward. Go get a result. Look at the result. Did it work? Was it good? Was it bad? Did it make you happy, make you sad? More of it, less of it, double down, whatever. And then because you've taken the action, you know what it feels like, you know what it looks like, and then you're analyzing it. When you go to do it again, you're going to do it better. You're going to do it more confidently. And that's where your wisdom is going to come from. That's where your power is going to come from. That's where your confidence is going to come from. So if you do this enough times, build that foundation, take action, analyze it, and then base your next actions or even your motive on those results. You do that enough times, the world is your oyster. You can create anything that you want. I truly believe that. So thank you so much for being here, everybody, on a Monday. Appreciate you. And I'll see you guys later.
If you'd like more information or to get connected to the Agent Power Huddle, join our free Facebook group. This call was designed for the agents in our EXP organization, but open to any agent from any brokerage. If you're a guest and you're interested in learning more about EXP or our specific resources within the Agent Collective, reach out to the person who invited you to this call to get more info. Produced by the Agent Collective Media Network.